Now let's go deeper into something most people think they understand, but almost nobody truly reads correctly: the eyes. You've heard it before: the eyes are the window to the soul. But that phrase gets thrown around so casually that it loses its weight. Because in reality, the eyes don't just reflect emotion, they transmit intention. And when it comes to attraction, intention is everything. See, most men make the mistake of thinking attraction is about obvious signals: big smiles, constant attention, clear interest. But real attraction rarely shows up in loud, exaggerated ways. It shows up in moments, fleeting, almost invisible moments that only someone paying attention can catch. And the eyes are where it all begins. When a woman is genuinely attracted to you, her gaze changes in a way that's subtle but incredibly powerful. It's not just about eye contact, it's about the quality of that eye contact. There's a softness that wasn't there before. A kind of openness, like she's not just looking at you, but allowing herself to be seen by you. And then something interesting happens. She doesn't hold that gaze forever, she breaks it. But here's the key: she comes back to it. That pattern, that rhythm of looking, pulling away, then returning, that's not random. That's tension being created in real time. Psychologically, it's a push-pull dynamic. One moment she's connected, the next she's creating space. And in that space, curiosity grows. Attraction builds, emotion deepens. This is where most people completely miss the point. They either stare too intensely, trying to lock in the moment, or they avoid eye contact altogether out of insecurity. But attraction isn't built in extremes. It's built in balance. It's built in understanding that connection is not about forcing a moment. It's about allowing it to breathe. When she looks at you, then glances away with a slight smile, what she's really doing is processing a feeling she didn't expect. And when her eyes find you again, almost unconsciously, that's her confirming that the feeling is real. You have to understand this on a deeper level. Human beings are wired to seek emotional experiences, not logical explanations. She may not even be consciously aware of why she keeps looking at you. But her mind is trying to make sense of something her body already decided. And here's where your awareness becomes your power. If you can recognize this pattern without reacting desperately, if you can meet her gaze with calm confidence instead of neediness, you shift the entire dynamic. Because now you're not chasing attention, you're receiving it. And there's a massive psychological difference between the two. Presence becomes your advantage. Instead of thinking, what do I say next? You start observing, what is she feeling right now? And when you operate from that level of awareness, your responses become naturally aligned. Your energy becomes grounded. And that, more than anything, is what amplifies attraction. Because confidence isn't about being loud or dominant. It's about being steady in moments that make other people uncomfortable. So when her eyes meet yours, don't rush to fill the silence. Don't break the moment out of fear. Let it exist. Let it stretch just enough to create that emotional charge. And then very naturally continue the interaction as if nothing forced just happened. That's where the magic is. Because what you're really doing is showing her that you're comfortable in connection and comfortable in tension. And that combination is rare. Attraction doesn't start with words. It starts with awareness, and the eyes are the first place that reveals itself. If you learn to read them, not just see them, but truly understand them, you stop guessing and you start knowing. And when you move through interactions with that level of clarity, you're no longer trying to create attraction. You're simply recognizing when it's already there and allowing it to grow. Now, once you begin to understand the language of the eyes, something else starts to come into focus, something even more subtle, yet just as revealing. Because attraction doesn't stay confined to one signal. It moves, it flows through the body. And one of the most overlooked places it shows up is the lips. Most people think lips are only expressive when someone is speaking. But in reality, they are constantly communicating, even in silence, especially in silence. When a woman is attracted to you, her lips begin to shift in ways that are not deliberate, not calculated, but deeply instinctive. You might notice they part slightly when she's listening to you. Not dramatically, not in an exaggerated way, but just enough to signal that her attention is no longer passive. It's engaged, it's focused. There's a subtle openness there, almost like her body is leaning into the moment before she even realizes it. And then there's the micro behaviors, the brief bite of the lower lip, the light press of her lips together before she speaks, the unconscious touch, fingers brushing near her mouth as if she's grounding herself in the moment. These are not random habits. These are physiological responses tied to heightened awareness and emotional stimulation. You have to understand this from a psychological perspective. When someone experiences attraction, their body begins to enter a state of alertness mixed with curiosity. It's not anxiety and it's not calm. It's something in between, a kind of charged stillness. And the lips, being one of the most sensitive and expressive parts of the body, become a natural outlet for that internal state. But here's where most people misinterpret what they're seeing. They either overanalyze it, assigning too much meaning to every small movement, or they ignore it completely because it doesn't fit into obvious verbal communication. And both of those approaches disconnect you from what's actually happening in front of you. Because the real value is not in the individual gesture, it's in the pattern. Is she more expressive with her lips when she's engaged with you compared to others? Do these subtle movements appear when the conversation becomes more personal, more emotionally charged? Does her attention seem to narrow as if the external world is fading slightly while you're speaking? That's where the signal becomes clear. Attraction is not a performance. It's a shift in presence. And when someone is truly present with you, their body reflects that focus in ways they cannot fully control. Now, here's the deeper layer, the philosophical side of this. Human beings are constantly balancing. NG between control and surrender. We want to appear composed, in control of our image, aware of how we're perceived. But attraction disrupts that balance. It introduces moments where control slips just slightly and authenticity takes over. The lips are often where that slip becomes visible. A woman may be trying to maintain a certain image, a certain level of composure, but her body reveals the truth in fragments. In those brief, unguarded moments where her lips soften, part, or react without permission, that's where you see what she's not saying. And your role is not to exploit that moment. It's to recognize it without pressure. Because the second you react with urgency, with neediness, or with the desire to capitalize on it, you break the natural flow of attraction. You turn something organic into something forced. And attraction doesn't survive in force. It thrives in space. So instead, you stay grounded. You notice, but you don't chase. You respond, but you don't overwhelm. You allow the moment to exist without trying to control its outcome. And that creates a powerful dynamic. Because now she feels seen, but not exposed. Understood, but not analyzed. And that distinction is everything. It builds comfort. It builds trust. And from that foundation, attraction deepens naturally. This is where awareness becomes more valuable than strategy. Anyone can memorize lines, techniques, or moves, but very few people develop the sensitivity to read what's happening beneath the surface. And when you operate from that level, your presence becomes different. More grounded, more intentional, more real. And that's what people respond to on a deeper level. So when you notice her lips subtly reacting, don't rush to interpret, don't rush to act. Just stay present enough to recognize that something is unfolding. Because attraction is rarely announced. It's revealed in pieces. And if you train yourself to see those pieces clearly, you don't have to chase connection anymore. You simply meet it where it already exists. And as you begin to recognize these subtle signals, the eyes, the lips, you start to realize something deeper is happening beneath all of it. Because attraction is not just about attention, it's about trust. And trust always reveals itself through vulnerability. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are certain parts of the body that instinctively represent vulnerability. Not because we're taught they do, but because at a biological level, they've always been associated with exposure and openness. And one of the most powerful of these areas is the neck and the collarbone. Think about it for a moment. The neck is one of the most unprotected parts of the human body. It's sensitive, exposed, and vital. Throughout history, across cultures, exposing the neck has been associated with a level of comfort and safety. Because when we don't feel safe, what do? We protect. We close off, shoulders tense, chin drops, posture tightens. The body literally begins to shield itself. But when a woman feels at ease around you, when there's a level of attraction combined with emotional comfort, you'll notice the opposite. Her posture opens. She may tilt her head slightly while listening, almost as if she's inviting the moment to come closer. She might brush her hair to one side, revealing the side of her neck without even realizing she's doing it. Or her collarbone area remains relaxed and visible instead of guarded or covered. These are not rehearsed actions. They are instinctive shifts from defense to openness. And this is where most people completely misread the situation. They assume attraction is all about excitement, energy, chemistry, and yes, those elements matter. But what sustains attraction, what allows it to grow beyond a surface level? Interaction is the presence of safety, emotional safety, psychological ease, because no one opens up physically or emotionally unless something within them says, this is okay. You can relax here. So when you see those subtle exposures, the neck, the collarbone, it's not just a physical signal. It's a reflection of an internal state. It's her body saying, I'm comfortable in this moment. I'm not guarded. I'm allowing this interaction to exist without resistance. Now, here's where your awareness becomes critical. If you misinterpret vulnerability as an opportunity to push harder, to escalate too quickly, you break the very thing that created the signal in the first place. You turn comfort into discomfort, openness into hesitation. But if you recognize it for what it truly is, a sign of trust beginning to form, you slow down, you match that openness with your own grounded presence. Not by overexposing yourself, not by trying to impress, but by simply being steady, calm, unreactive in the best sense of the word. Because when someone feels safe around you, they don't just show you more of their body language, they start to show you more of who they are. And that's where attraction deepens into connection. This is also where the philosophical layer comes into play. Human beings are constantly navigating the tension between protection and expression. We all have walls, not because we want to disconnect, but because we've learned to be careful. And every now and then we meet someone who makes those walls lower, not through force, but through presence. That's what you're witnessing in these moments. A temporary lowering of defenses, a brief shift from guarded to open, and those moments are incredibly valuable, not because they guarantee anything, but because they reveal possibility. So instead of trying to control the outcome, you focus on maintaining that environment that allowed that openness to appear. You stay present, you stay aware, you let the interaction breathe, and something subtle but powerful begins to happen. She doesn't feel like she needs to protect herself around you. And when that feeling grows, attraction no longer has to fight for space. It naturally expands. Because at its core, attraction is not just about being desired, it's about feeling safe enough to be seen. So the next time you notice her tilt her head, expose her neck, or relax into that openness, don't rush to define it, don't rush to act on it. Just recognize what it represents. It's not just attraction, it's trust, quietly beginning to take shape. And if you can learn to respect that, to honor it without forcing it, you won't just create moments of connection, you'll create space where connection can actually last. And as you start to see how attraction reveals itself through the eyes, through the lips, through subtle moments of openness, there's another layer that becomes impossible to ignore once you're aware of it, the hands. Because the hands don't just act, they react. They respond to internal states faster than words ever could. And when a woman is feeling something she hasn't fully processed yet, interest, curiosity, attraction, her hands often become the first place that energy shows up. Now think about this. When people are completely calm, completely neutral, their hands are still. There's no unnecessary movement, no extra expression. But the moment emotion enters the picture, especially an emotion that carries a mix of excitement and uncertainty, the body looks for an outlet. And the hands become that outlet. You'll start to notice small, almost insignificant movements. She might adjust her hair even when it doesn't need fixing. She might lightly touch her face while listening, trace the edge of a glass, play with a ring, or shift tea. Our fingers together in a way that feels rhythmic, almost unconscious. These aren't habits in isolation. They're expressions of internal energy looking for release. This is what most people misunderstand about attraction. They think it's a clean, controlled experience. Either it's there or it's not. But real attraction is messy in the best way. It creates a kind of nervous energy, a heightened awareness where the mind is engaged, but the body is slightly ahead, reacting in real time. And the hands give that away. But here's where your perception matters. If you look at these movements without context, they seem random, meaningless, easy to dismiss. But when you connect them with everything else you've already started to notice, the eye contact, the softness in her expression, the openness in her posture, they form a pattern. And patterns tell the truth. Now, there's another dimension to this that goes even deeper. The hands are also tied to expression and connection. They're how we interact with the world physically. So when a woman becomes more expressive with her hands around you, it's often a sign that she's becoming more engaged with your presence. You might notice her gestures becoming more animated as the conversation progresses. Her movements becoming more fluid, more natural. Or in some cases, more restrained, but with subtle tension underneath, like she's aware of her own reactions and trying to contain them. And then there's the moment that most people overlook entirely, proximity. When her hands begin to move closer into your space, even slightly, that's not accidental. It might be a brief touch on your arm to emphasize a point, a playful nudge, or even just her hand resting near yours on a table without pulling away. These moments are small, but they carry weight. Because physical space is one of the clearest boundaries people maintain, and when that boundary ends, it means something has shifted internally. Now, here's where most people make a critical mistake. They see these signals and immediately feel the urge to act on them, to respond quickly, to escalate, to do something with that information. But the moment you rush, you disrupt the natural flow that created those signals in the first place. Because what you're witnessing is not a green light for action, it's a reflection of comfort and growing interest. And those two things require space to develop. So instead of reacting impulsively, you do something far more powerful. You remain grounded. You allow her to express that energy without trying to control it or redirect it. You stay present enough to notice, but composed enough not to chase. And that creates a dynamic that's rare. Because now she doesn't feel like she's being watched or analyzed. She feels like she's being experienced without pressure. And that distinction changes everything. This is where awareness turns into influence. Not influence through manipulation, but influence through presence. Through understanding what's happening beneath the surface and choosing not to interfere with it unnecessarily. Because the truth is, attraction grows strongest in environments where it doesn't feel forced. And the hands, in all their subtle movement, are showing you that something is building, something is shifting. Something is becoming more real with every passing moment. So the next time you notice those small gestures, the hair adjustment, the light touch, the restless fingers, don't brush them off and don't overreact to them. Just recognize them for what they are. They are the body speaking when the mind is still catching up. And if you can learn to listen without interrupting, you won't just understand attraction better, you will allow it to unfold exactly the way it was meant to. And as you begin to recognize these patterns, the eyes, the lips, the subtle openness, the movement of the hands, you start to see that attraction is not a single signal. It's a system, a coordinated expression of attention, emotion, and presence. And one of the most honest parts of that system is direction. Because the body, unlike words, doesn't know how to pretend for long. It naturally orients itself toward what it's interested in, not because it's trying to send a message, but because attention has gravity. And whatever we're drawn to, we begin to physically align with. Now think about how people behave when they're disengaged. Their bodies drift. Their feet point toward the nearest exit. Their shoulders angle away. Even if they're nodding, even if they're saying the right thing, something feels off. That's because their body is already somewhere else, even if their words are still in the conversation. But when a woman is genuinely attracted to you, something shifts. Her body starts to align. It might be subtle at first. A slight turn of the shoulders in your direction, her feet angling toward you, even when she's standing in a group. A natural lean when you're speaking, as if she's closing the distance without consciously deciding to do so. These are not rehearsed behaviors. They are instinctive adjustments driven by focus. And focus is the foundation of attraction. Because where attention goes, energy follows, and where energy flows, connection begins to build. Now, here's where most people misinterpret what's happening. They focus only on the face, the smile, the eye contact, the verbal responses, but the body is telling a parallel story, one that's often more accurate because it's not filtered, it's not edited for social approval. It simply reacts. You might notice that even when she's engaged in a group conversation, her body keeps subtly returning to you, her torso reorients, her posture shish. It's almost like there's an invisible thread pulling her attention back in your direction. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. And alignment is powerful because it reveals consistency. It shows that her interest is not just momentary, it's sustained. It's pulling her back again and again without effort. But here's the deeper layer, the philosophical side that most people never consider. Human beings are always revealing their priorities through their bodies, not through what they say they care about, but through what they naturally give their attention to. And alignment is a physical expression of priority. So when her body consistently orients toward you, even in small ways, it's reflecting something internal, something real, something that hasn't been fully verbalized yet. And your role in that moment is not to chase it, it's to match it, not by copying her movements in an obvious way, but by being equally present, equally engaged, by allowing your own body language to remain open, grounded, and directed. Because attraction is not just about being noticed, it's about being felt. And presence is what makes that possible. Now, let's talk about a mistake that quietly destroys this dynamic: overcompensation. The moment someone notices interest, they often try to amplify it. They lean in too much. They invade space too quickly. They try to lock in the connection. But in doing so, they remove the very tension that made the interaction exciting in the first place. Because attraction thrives in a balance between closeness and space. So when her body leans in, you don't rush forward to meet it aggressively. You allow that space to exist. You let her come towards you without resistance, but also without pressure. And that creates something rare. It creates a feeling of ease. Because now the interaction is not being forced forward, it's unfolding naturally. And when Something unfolds naturally, it feels safe, it feels real, it feels sustainable. This is where awareness becomes more valuable than action because anyone can act, anyone can try to impress, to lead, to control the direction of an interaction. But very few people can simply be present enough to recognize when the connection is already forming and allow it to grow without interference. And that's what makes the difference. So the next time you're in a conversation, stop focusing only on what's being said. Pay attention to where the body is pointing. Notice the subtle shifts in direction, the unconscious alignment, the way her presence keeps returning to you even when there are distractions around, because that's where the truth is. Not in the words, not in the surface level gestures, but in the quiet, consistent direction of her attention. And if you can learn to read that, to trust it, to respond to it with calm, grounded presence, you won't have to wonder whether attraction exists. You'll be able to see it clearly in the way her entire body chooses you, even before she ever says a word. And as you begin to connect all of this, the eyes that invite, the lips that reveal, the openness of the neck, the expressive hands, the alignment of the body, you start to see attraction for what it truly is. Not a single moment, not a single signal, but a sequence, a quiet unfolding of awareness between two people. And this is where one of the most overlooked signals comes into play: movement. Not loud movement, not dramatic gestures, but the subtle, almost unnoticeable way a woman becomes more aware of her own body when she's around you, especially in how she positions and repositions herself over time. Because when attraction is present, self-awareness increases. She becomes more conscious, not in a forced or artificial way, but in a natural, instinctive way of how she's sitting, how. She's standing, how she's shifting her weight. You might notice small adjustments, the way she crosses and uncrosses her legs, the way she straightens her posture for a brief moment, then relaxes again. The way her movements slow down slightly, becoming more deliberate, more fluid. These are not random behaviors. They are expressions of presence. You have to understand this at a deeper psychological level. When someone is around a person they feel neutral about, their body operates on autopilot. Movements are efficient, unconscious, almost mechanical. There's no reason to think about how they're being perceived because there's no emotional investment in the moment. But when attraction enters the picture, that changes. Now there is awareness. Now there is a subtle shift from being to being seen. And in that shift, behavior becomes more intentional without becoming forced. That's why her movements may seem slightly more refined, more controlled, or even more graceful than usual. Not because she's performing, but because part of her attention has turned inward. She's aware of herself in relation to you. And this is where most people completely miss what's actually happening. They either ignore these movements because they seem too subtle to matter, or they misinterpret them as conscious attempts to impress. But the truth lies somewhere deeper than both of those interpretations. These movements are not about you in isolation. They're about the experience she is having in your presence, and that's a critical distinction. Because attraction is not just about how someone sees you, it's about how they feel within themselves when they're around you. Do they feel more alive, more aware, more present? Oh. Or do they feel closed off, distracted, disconnected? The body answers that question long before the mind does. Now, here's where your role becomes essential. When you notice these subtle shifts, the repositioning, the slow adjustments, the increased awareness, you don't interrupt them. You don't call attention to them. You don't try to escalate the moment prematurely. You allow it. You let her exist in that heightened state of awareness without pressure. Because the moment she feels observed in a way that creates self-consciousness instead of comfort, the entire dynamic changes. The natural flow disappears, and what was instinctive becomes controlled. But if you remain grounded, calm, steady, present, you create the space for that awareness to deepen instead of retreat, and something powerful begins to happen. She doesn't just become aware of her body, she becomes aware of the connection. Because now the interaction is no longer just a conversation, it's an experience. A shared moment where both people are subtly tuned into each other, even without words. This is where attraction evolves into something more meaningful, not louder, not more obvious, but more real. And here's the philosophical truth behind all of it. Human beings are constantly adjusting themselves based on what they feel. We move closer to what resonates, and we subtly reshape our behavior in environments where we feel something worth exploring. These small movements, these quiet adjustments, they are the body's way of leaning into possibility. So when you see her shift, reposition, slow down, or become more aware of how she carries herself around you, don't dismiss it. Recognize it for what it is. It's not just movement, it's engagement. It's her body stepping out of autopilot and into the present moment with you as part of that experience. And if you can learn to recognize that without rushing it, without trying to control it, without breaking the rhythm that allowed it to exist, you move into a completely different level of connection. Because now you're not trying to create attraction. You're allowing it to unfold naturally, authentically in its own time. And that is where the real power lies. Because at the end of the day, attraction isn't about forcing someone to feel something. It's about creating a presence where feeling something becomes inevitable.